Committee meeting, Tuesday, October 4th. I'll ask for a declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Could I have an approval of the agenda as amended? Mayor Daw, seconded.
And we need 2/3 for your notice of motion to go.
Councillor Humphreys. Should I do that now?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So, indulge me, committee. There was a late notice of motion brought in and on the agenda, and we need 2/3 procedure, waiver of procedure bylaw to bring that onto the agenda. So, could I have someone move that forward? Councillor Perry, seconded Councillor Kim. Comments, questions? 2/3 majority. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Madam Clerk. So the motion, we don't have to do this again. I have a mover for as agended. All right. Comments, question on the agenda as amended? Seeing none, I'll vote. All in favor? Opposed? That carries, Madam Clerk. We will go to determination of items requiring separate discussion. I'll start on my right just to mix things up. Councillor Maracas?
Do you mind skipping me for a sec, Mr. Chair?
I can always come back.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Gardner?
Could you skip me too, please?
Yes. Maybe I should go to the left right now.
Yeah.
Items 5 and 6.
Mayor Dahl?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I would like item 18, please, be added tonight.
Councillor Humphreys?
Item 11?
Councillor Kim?
Mine was pulled, thank you.
Councillor Perry? Councillor Maracas and Councillor Gardner. Doesn't matter who. I'll do a quick review while we're waiting. 5, 6, 11, and 18 so far. Thank
Number
you,
2,
Councillor Maracas.
please. Number 2.
Adoption of items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Gardner. Comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Madam Clerk. Delegations tonight, Madam Clerk, do we have any? There are none. None allowed. Presentations by the Advisory Committee Chair. We can do that next week, if, okay. Presentation, we just did that. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. I'll poll the audience. Are there any that we'd like to bring forward? Speak up. Okay. Then we'll start with item 2, and that was polled by Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gardner, would you care to put that on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move as is.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Maracas, thank you. You have the floor, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey. A couple of questions while I find my notes. I assume we've finished the 2-year phase-in of the seniors increase.
Mr. Downey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to Aquafit?
With regards to everything?
Well, if you recall, we had the last fees and services, we had looked at increasing the Aquafit fees, and so this is the second half of that now. However, we've also imposed a 1.1% increase across the board.
Thank you. So is there a seniors discount across the board?
You, Mr. Chair, yes, 20%.
20%?
Correct.
Thank you. I had a question about the, a couple of comments with respect to the programming at the SARC. Mr. Downey has put in some really good basketball drop-ins. What I noticed is that they're not very well used in the summer, and I don't know whether it's to be discussed tonight or at budget. But one of the main age groups where physical activity falls off is the teenagers. So I'm wondering whether maybe during the summer months we could have a reduced rate and have some communications to bring in the teenagers. I mean, it is Aurora, a lot of people are away, but at the same time, try and fill that gym up in the summer. And the other one is at the fitness center. I'm often there in the evening or on Saturday or Sunday afternoon. It's very quiet. And I'm wondering whether maybe we could look at in providing incentives to the 14 to 19-year-old age group in keeping with the mayor's intent to activate Aurora. So would that be something, through you, Mr. Chair, that we would discuss tonight, or would that be a budget item?
I'll ask our CAO if he wants to comment, or perhaps Mayor Dahl? Perhaps, Mr. Elliott, did you want to weigh in? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the fees and charges that are before you tonight are intended to become effective 2017. There's two choices. You could have your discussion tonight, although some staff, we may be somewhat unprepared for it. Further, we could have the discussion during the budget and reserve, either approve these and then amend them later after any discussion of budget, or we could set aside a particular schedule and wait for budget discussion.
Thank you, and it's true, I haven't discussed it with staff, and it was kind of a last-minute thought, and maybe it should be a budget discussion then.
Thank you. And I might suggest that Mr. Weiss, who headed up Activate Aurora, might appreciate some of the ideas that you have and maybe a vehicle for assisting in communicating that out or getting it into his sort of program.
Thank you. And when I was on the Youth Advisory Committee, you know, that was one of the things. How do we keep our teenagers active? So any discussion around it, I'd appreciate.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to add to that, you know, very good suggestion. I guess the budget time is the right time to discuss it. Just the other day, there were a couple of young kids skateboarding and just wondering how they could join the fitness club, but they couldn't afford probably the monthly rate. So probably a really good idea to think about how we can do that, especially in the winter months when the kids are, you know, if they're not doing their hockey or sports, there's an opportunity for them to go and utilize the gym when, you know, maybe right after school or something. So great thought.
Councillor.
And just as a follow-up on this, and I know Mr. Downey knows, we have staff at the complex who are keeping very detailed statistics on, you know, when the center is busy and when it isn't, the fitness center, and I don't know if they're doing it with the gym too. So we do have some hard data to and Mr. Downey's expertise to kind of put it together.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other comments, questions? Councillor Gardner, we're back onto the fees and to the item, right? Okay, thank you. Microphone, please.
On page 23, with respect to the artificial turf field, I think it was last week that we found out that although the artificial turf field was meant to last for 15 years before replacement, it's now only lasting 10 because of the use. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey, do we know how the fees relate to the replacement cost recovery for the artificial turf?
Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the fees for the turf field don't relate to the replacement. What they relate to is our overall field costs. When we originally brought the turf field to Shepherd's Bush, if you recall, it was a grass field. When we converted to turf, we charged the same fee to our user groups, our regular user groups, our Aurora Youth Soccer groups, as if it was a grass field. The reason for that is if we charged a higher rate, we were concerned that they would migrate or continue to migrate to our grass fields, which was the reason we were trying to get them off the grass fields and onto the artificial turf. So we didn't want to put a cost barrier on that particular field. However, that was during the regular season. During the off season, the rate goes up substantially. The artificial turf field per hour goes from $8.83 to $197 during the off season. So a dramatic increase. If you're a non-resident and you want to use it during off season, it's substantially more than if you are a resident, a nonprofit group such as Aurora Youth Soccer during the regular season. But the fees do not relate to a replacement of the turf.
Thank you. Follow-up. How much does it cost to replace the artificial turf?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so we have a budget item to be considered in 2017 for replacing the turf. I believe that number is $400,000. We have done some research. If you recall, when we put the turf in, we wanted to make sure that we were using recycled product. So it is going to be recycled. Much of the product is going to be recycled. So we're looking at around $400,000 for replacement of the turf at Shepherd's Bush.
Thank you. And so maybe this also should be discussed at budget because, you know, in our 10-year repair and replacement plan, we were figuring 15 years for the artificial turf, and now it's 10. So that's a pretty big change. And also perhaps a discussion around the school boards. When I sat on the Leisure Services Advisory Committee, and Mr. Downey knows this, we wanted to use the Board of Ed fields, and we had a lot of trouble with that. So I don't know where we're at now, if it's reciprocal or if, well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that, but that is a discussion for the budget. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Madam Clerk. Item 5, pulled by Councillor Thompson. Word for tender. Would you care to put that on the floor? Seconded. Councillor Maracas, the floor is yours. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my one concern is, you know, much was made about the Operations Center coming in on budget. This is the second item that's come before us in the last few months about, you know, additional pieces. So through you to Mr. Simonovskis, can you, you know, sort of respond to the question about why these weren't included in the original plans for the JLC and why this is the second item that's come before us after the work has been completed?
If I could, Councillor Thompson, the first item was?
Well, the first one was the fuel dispensing stations that came to us in March or April of this year.
Very good. I appreciate that. Mr. Simonovskis.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So maybe just to help with what council has seen, the fuel dispensing system was actually in budget. It was actually a separate supply to the contract, so we had to tender it through our internal procurement, but that was part of the original budget. The greenhouse floor, we had intended to do it as part of the contract. There was some expectation that if we had taken this out of the work and done it on our own, that there was an opportunity to reduce costs, potentially have some cost savings. However, after going through the tendering process ourselves, we found that there really is no savings, and we're at the situation now where we're trying to complete this floor when we could have actually done it as part of the contract earlier or earlier in last year. We really are in a situation now where we need to do it, and it's going to cost us the same. So, but because it's outside of the contract itself, we're bringing this report forward.
Councillor.
I appreciate the explanation. I think my concern is that you know, we set a budget for the construction of the facility, and we were proud to say that it came in under budget. And you know, there's a perception now that with these two items that, you know, perhaps they were left off to allow us to come into under budget, and we're dealing with them separately. And so, you know, I think it's important for us to be able to say to the residents, you know, exactly what's going on here, so that they know that the project came in as budgeted.
Councillor Maracas, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I share some of those same concerns. I guess I can say that I guess maybe what we've learned from this instance is that sometimes it doesn't pay to wait to get a better price, and so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. It's a general question. Is there a way to, when we do construction projects like this, and I mean a lot of money is involved, is there a way for us to know is there quality control? Is there a way for us to know that we've gotten what we paid for, that the workmanship is done to the best standard? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis.
Mr. Simonovskis.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. There is a way, and we actually have a process in place for quality control. We have, in this project in particular, we had the architect who was the architect of record. So their responsibility is to oversee the construction quality, ensured delivery as per the specifications. We also had a project manager who was brought in as a third-party oversight. And we also have, typical in all of our construction projects, a materials testing firm that's brought in as a third-party confirmer of quality of whether it's compaction or concrete or asphalt. So, and these are all standard QA/QC processes that we have for our projects.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, so it's the architect and the project manager that are responsible for the quality of the workmanship?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Correct, through you, Mr. Chair, correct.
And we hold them accountable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do hold them accountable. I mean, we have our staff as well involved in the projects. They have a professional obligation. They have to sign off on the project. They have to verify that it meets building code requirements. There's a lot of responsibility behind that architect stamp, so there is a lot of motivation that it's done correctly.
So they have to ensure that we get what we paid for.
Correct.
Thank you.
Committee, anything else? I'll call Councillor Kim.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonauskas, can you confirm how you allocated the amounts to the three reserves there in page 3, please?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair. In a staff report earlier this year, we identified a detailed summary of the project expenditures to date, and there were some items left as budget amounts for uncompleted work at that point in time. So what we have in the table, which I'm just trying to find here, in the table we had the budget amount for the construction, which was $60,000. We had another item, or some other items that came in under budget, so we reallocated those funds towards this project. As well, within our annual operating budget, we have a number of line items for the maintenance and operation of the building, of which we are allocating some of that funding towards the remainder to come up to the required amount of $176,000.
So through you to Mr. Simonauskas, on the operating budget, even though we're using $60,000, we're still on target for 2016 for the rest of the maintenance and operational costs.
Mr. Simonauskas?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. We're working with that budget based on what we have available within the operating side, as well as what we were able to save within the remaining uncompleted works in the capital project.
Councillor?
Mr. Simonauskas, when you mentioned previously the construction projects, when you bring them out to tender in January, you frequently get a better pricing. Would this also be a candidate for better pricing if we put this out there in January as opposed to at this time?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Through you, Mr. Chair, always a good question, and it's always a debate. We, with this particular piece of work, with the assistance of a designer that we had retained to help with putting together specifications, there was an initial estimate that was prepared based on an initial scope of work. That work was reduced once the budgets had come in from the architect to basically bring those costs down. Then the refined budget was brought in. It was still fairly high, but at the time we felt that we needed to get something moving on this particular piece of the project to allow for Mr. Downey's staff to have use of the greenhouse for this winter. So that's one of the pressures we're dealing with. The results of the tender, as you can see in the pricing, are fairly wide. However, based on what was submitted from a cost estimate perspective from the architect, the low price is within the range expected. So there's confidence that this is reasonably fair pricing. And I would suggest, considering the fact that there is some pressure, time pressure from the perspective of the operation, we are recommending proceeding with this price at this time.
And lastly, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonauskas, what would be the downstream impacts to staff if we did not go ahead with the concrete flooring? What would be the disadvantage?
Is this the greenhouse?
Mr. Downey may have some comment. I mean, I would suggest it's going to be very difficult to actually have plants on the street next summer. The flowers and plants that Mr. Downey's staff propagate through the winter. That's the risk.
Councillor? Councillor Maracas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to, I guess, Mr. Downey. Have we always had a greenhouse?
Mr. Downey?
So, Mr. Chair, we've had a greenhouse for a little over 20 years.
Okay. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
It's all those beautiful plants we see on the road and potters, et cetera. Okay. Seeing no further questions, comments, Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonauskas, we're talking about a concrete slab. Would there be any cost savings, or would it be beneficial if we looked at a different form of flooring, or is the concrete pad for structural uses? Could we put in asphalt?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair, we have looked at a number of options. We've looked at a number of configurations. There are a number of elements in this slab that do cost money that really aren't related to the slab. There's an under drain system. There's a stormwater collection system for the greenhouse roof itself. There's some excavation work that has to happen regardless of what the finishes are. So to answer your question, we've looked at this a number of ways. Both my staff and Mr. Downey's staff have spent a number of meetings trying to make this as efficient as possible. We're at the stage right now, and I support the direction that's being recommended from the perspective of a long-term usability and life cycle perspective. This product will be well served in the greenhouse, and from a cost perspective, it's really a small component to the overall overall cost of our operation and what the value is that it's bringing from our greenhouse community perspective.
So I guess I'll ask the question a different way. What are the downsides to having asphalt in the greenhouse as opposed to concrete?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we've actually been in discussion with this for quite a period of time. The preferred floor is concrete. We actually have asphalt in the greenhouse floor as it was no longer there anymore since we've disposed of Scanlon. But asphalt is a possibility. Asphalt would have been somewhat easier to install if the greenhouses weren't already in situation. The floors are much easier to pour concrete now that we have the greenhouses in place. Difficult to get in there, get sufficient compaction on the floor with asphalt at this time. We need a good drainage system. It has to be a hard surface floor. We need to be able to wash this floor down, make sure we keep disease and bacteria down in the greenhouse. And we also, the planters you see on Yonge Street are pretty heavy. We need to cart those things around, so we need a hard surface in order to cart them on. So a granular floor doesn't work. And so really the only alternative is either to go asphalt or concrete. But now with the situation we have right now, we believe concrete's a better solution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to Mr. Simonauskas or Mr. Downey, then am I right to say that the reason why asphalt could have been an option, but the reason why it's not was because of poor planning in terms of the order of operations?
Well, that's a comment.
Mr. Downey stated that
through you, Mr. Chair, the sequence of operation for the project, I would never say anything is a result of poor planning. Everything is a result of proper sequencing. And when you're dealing with a project, when you're dealing with different seasons, when you're dealing with construction activities that are occurring concurrently or adjacent to certain areas, certain activities have to happen before others. As the project was proceeding, it became evident that proceeding with the installation of the greenhouse was a preferred direction for a number of reasons, and one not being the least that the manufacturer was not recommending or was not suggesting building a pad in advance, because you need to basically build the foundations, and where the foundations end up then determine where the pad goes. So there are a number of sequencing opportunities that basically unfolded to where we are. The reason why we decided to take the greenhouse floor out of the project was because of the sequencing. It didn't make any difference whether we did it now or later, and we thought there was an opportunity to potentially save some costs there. So these are decisions that are made as the project unfolds, and this is the way it went, and at the time we thought this was the best approach to take.
Councillor? Thank you. I see no more questions. I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Madam Clerk. Item 6, Leslie Street Underpass. Councillor Thompson?
I can't move it at this time.
Okay. Someone care to put this on the floor? For discussion. Mayor Daw, seconded. Councillor Humphreys? Councillor Thompson, the floor is yours.
Just a couple, and if I can ask, instead of the motion, can I ask that the overview, the attachment be placed on the screen? Just, I have
Linda, if you could help us there.
Yeah,
Which page is that?
It's the attachment.
The
Last
attachment.
page.
Thank you. That's item 7.
It's the satellite
Page 7.
view. Just a couple things. One, I guess, when this first appeared before us in 2013, the price for those 2 underpasses was $475,000. In 2015, it came back to us, and it was a couple $100,000 more. And now it's come back to us again, and it's a couple $100,000 more. So it's gone from $475,000 with the initial Class D, E, F estimate, whatever you want to call it, to now $900,000. Plus, there's still, within the report, it says a potential future cost of illumination and so forth, but there's no price tag to it. So I'm not sure if Mr. Downey can speak to what is the potential future cost if we are to go forward and put illumination and some of these other features that may or may not be necessary down the road and which aren't eligible for shared funding.
Mr.
So
Downey.
through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have a costing for illumination of the tunnels. I certainly can get that if you want for next week, but I don't have that cost estimate at this time.
Would you be able to ballpark it?
I'd be afraid to ballpark it because this is where we are now, and so I'm afraid to ballpark it and then come up with a different number.
Thank you.
Councillor?
And so, my second issue, and we had this debate last time, and while, underpass D is, there's a connection on the other side of Leslie Street, and it goes through the Smart Center lands, and that one seems like a fairly good probability. The northern underpass, Underpass C, which is north of St. John's, the lands to the east, currently are in private possession, I believe, if I can get confirmation through you to Mr. Ramuno. But also, do we have any indication that, within the next 5 years that they're going to be developed, or is there any sort of conversation going on between those landowners and the town about future plans? Through you to Mr. Ramuno.
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, is it?
The lands are the northeast corner of St. John's and Leslie.
Where Underpass C is.
C, correct. We, on the east side of Leslie Street, we currently have an application, a subdivision application, that comprise that entire quadrant.
So and that goes right through to 404?
Two separate applications, yes.
Thank you.
So what I'm trying to get is a sense of the probability of us being able to acquire that trail, because right now, the concern would be us building an underpass that doesn't lead to anything. And so, through you to Mr. Ramuno, is it likely that in the next 5 to 10 years that we will secure that easement or that trail connection that will go from Leslie Street and loop down through St. John's and back, as per the trail master plan? I know it's hard to see it here on the black and white. I don't know if we could put a color one on instead.
Mr. Ramuno, I think that underpass comes right into where the block on the map says underpass location C, which is a forest feature, correct? Okay.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So that east of Leslie Street, it is a wooded area valley system, and it is part of the current plan of subdivision that we have. Those owners are, are working towards getting their approvals. We haven't brought it to council yet. So I think over the next year, we should be able to secure those lands just east of Leslie Street. As we move further east, there is a separate application that we're dealing with. That may be a little more contingent on the timing of the future interchange at St. John's and a 4-4. But I see that within the next year or two, we should be in a position to secure that block immediately east of Leslie Street.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I think it's important that if we're going to approve the increase in funding to build that underpass, that there's got to be a reasonable probability of those trails actually being established in the near future.
Thank you, Mayor Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further, I guess, Mr. Downey, to Councillor Thompson's point, on underpass C, so the trails which would be on the east side of Leslie and then north of St. John's, where do those trails go?
Mr. Downey?
Do they terminate at St. John's?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, they actually go under St. John's. If you recall, there's another underpass that is totally regionally funded going under St. John.
But isn't that on the west side?
That's on the west side, that's correct. So you would then loop through the lands to the west and then down to the south into Aurora, and to the north up into.
I think the question is.
So my question is on the east side, and I'm sorry,
okay.
I can't see it too well, but where does the trail go? So from underpass location C, it goes.
Yes. So we have secured trail access through Emery.
Emery?
Because
that's down below.
Yes,
I
know.
On the north
but
side
but yeah, I'm sorry. Do you want to know where it goes to the south, or do you want to know where it goes to the north, or?
Well, from underpass C, which is right at the north.
Right.
So it goes east through the feature, through the natural feature. That's wooded area, I believe.
Correct.
Then it's going to go south of what is proposed for the Sabera.
Correct.
And then it loops down the east side, or west side, pardon me, of 404 to St. John's. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it proposed to go under St. John's at that point?
Correct.
But that's not in place at this point?
Correct.
So that will be some future expense?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? If I could ask, the funding request of 900,000, is that our cost, or is that a cost to be split between us and the region?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's the cost to the town, and it's split between the two. So if you take a look on the chart,
yes,
it shows what the cost to Aurora is. So on page 5 of 6, you'll notice that the Aurora cost is $805,321.49. Then the region places a 6% administration cost, as well as a 6% inspection cost, for a total cost to Aurora for the two underpasses of $901,000. That's based on the tender costs. We asked the region, what if there are overages on this contract? We may be coming back to council asking for more money if there's overages on this contract, which we are not in control of.
Okay. And is this funded through DCs?
This is funded through DCs, that's correct.
And Councillor Thompson was correct when we saw this in 2013. That price was, I believe, 200 and 250 or 200. I think the total was just under 500,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is the third increase that you have seen. Well, you've had the base price, and we've increased. We've come back to council twice now asking for more money. I really don't want to come back a third time, but this is a regionally controlled project, and all I'm doing is providing information from the region saying, this is how much it's going to cost. Do you want to still do it? And so I'm coming back and saying, here it is. I'm I don't know whether or not they're going to be coming back again. If there happens to be overages on this contract, they may
Yes.
very well be asking us to pay those overages as well.
But it could be tendered less, but we should.
It is tendered now.
Okay, thank
This
you.
is a tendered cost.
And-
But that doesn't mean that there might be overages on the tender, but we may be relating to the underpasses, that we may be subject to additional costs.
Thank you.
I really don't want to write a fourth report.
And last question about power. Will power be there relative, like roughed in, so that we're not doing all the infrastructure and then going, oh, we forgot to drop a line here?
Through Mr. Chair, so we're going to make sure we have services there that allow us to go off and do these. We don't have any other underpasses within town, so I don't have a point of reference with regards to costs. That's why I would like a little bit of time to go around. I know there are some illuminated underpasses in some of our neighboring municipalities that perhaps we could capture some costs from, but they would be a service site.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've got Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, so that the admin costs at 6%, that's the region?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And through you to Mr. Downey, the inspection cost, is that through the region also?
Correct.
So the region is charging us 12%?
Correct.
That's pretty hefty charge to our residents.
It's 1% less than Kathleen Wynne, but anyway.
That's, you know, that's a pretty. I mean, I'm astonished at that they're charging us 12%. Like, geez, that's unbelievable. Sorry.
Duly noted. Seeing no more comments, I'll call a vote. All those in, Mayor Dow?
This may be short-sighted on my part, but I really can't see supporting location C. Mr. Downey just did a slump, but where is it going to go to in the long term? I don't see it, and I'm pleased to have Mr. Downey jump in and convince me otherwise, but I can't see where it's going to come to a complete trail connection. And because it's going to be contingent on getting something from the region and or MTO at St. John's and the 404, contingent on getting land down through the piece of property just south of St. John's, and then perhaps contingent on Emery. Mr. Downey, give it your best shot.
Through you, Mr. Chair. If you recall, and I'm happy to provide perhaps the staff report back to council for a reference, but if you recall, both underpasses were approved. Then council made a decision not to approve underpass C. Then there was a reconsideration on underpass C, and council did approve underpass C. So then we proceeded forward with the understanding that council, through the reconsideration, wanted underpass C. So we've moved forward with that. If council decides they don't, that's fair. I would request an opportunity to present the report that we presented to council as part of that reconsideration to justify the need for underpass C prior to making any determination as to whether or not we fund it.
Can we have that report by next week? Can you circulate it before?
Absolutely, it's already done. It's already been considered by council. So.
Thank you.
Well, again, through you, Mr. Chair, if we were to come back in 2 weeks, would that have a serious impact on the timing, or would you like to see this cleared up more quickly? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is no, that wouldn't. This isn't overly time sensitive. They would like an answer for sure. We have informed the region that we were coming forward this evening. We can certainly communicate to them that council wishes to have some more deliberation with regards to this, and we can come back in 2 weeks with that additional report, or we can come back next council with that additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can make that determination then next week at council. And in the meantime, we can refresh ourselves on the report that Mr. Downey is referring to.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Mr. Downey, just to clarify what you said with regards to underpass C, my recollection is a little bit different. My recollection is we were really dealing with underpass A, which is the one that is not shown here, which is just south of St. John's Road, and that was the one that you know, kind of came back and forth. The region didn't support it, but I kind of remember Klaus coming up and delegating for it, but there was significant cost with it, and that was the one that council ultimately decided not to go forward with. So
I think you're right.
Right, so, you know, C and D were a little bit different, but the focus was on A. But I think it is a good idea to circulate that report again, have council take a look at it. You know, given the increase in costs, I'm comfortable with proceeding with underpass location D, but I share the same concerns as the mayor that underpass location C may not go anywhere other than a small little loop through that wooded area. And so I'm happy to receive this for information until we get the rest of the reports.
Mr. Downey, if I could, there is significant development in Newmarket to the north. Is there any indication, or could you provide to council whether there might be a loop into there, as well as the ones going south?
Certainly. What I'll do is I'll provide some trail maps, which will show a connection and the need for location C or underpass C, and what connections it might have to our neighboring municipality.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Ms. Desario. Any legal ramifications? I wouldn't normally ask with another order of government that we're supposed to be working with, but we are getting charged this 12%. Any legal ramifications if we decide at this point to say thanks, but no thanks to underpass C?
Ms. Desario, please.
Sorry. Through you to Councillor Perry. I'd have to look into it further. I know that there is an underpass agreement that we're working on that may deal with this. So I need to see what the terms of the agreement say. And then if this is a tender, I need to see what the documents, the contracts, any other contracts that we may have with the region of Peel. So I can look into it for you.
That would be, if we could have that by next week, that would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councillor Humphreys might be able to refresh my memory, but I'm pretty sure that this wasn't at this term of Trails Committee. It was on it went before last term. So I'm just wondering if we are going to take that 2 weeks to kind of look at it. We do have one coming up this month. Maybe we could send it also to the Trails Committee and have their opinion on what their thoughts are with this one, and is it something that we actually do want to see move forward? And maybe that might be a good thing to kind of get that perspective back to us.
It's a good suggestion. Can we do that? Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for jumping in, but on page 4 of 6, so I guess of the report, we need an answer by it says here by the end of 16, so we do have some time. So if you wish to send it off to Trails Committee, we have no objection, and perhaps the Trails Committee can provide some direction or assistance to Council with regards to determination of whether we want to spend the additional funds.
Very good. Yes, okay, so the clerk has just said the advisory committee review has taken place, but Councillor Maracas has said, was it this term?
It wasn't this term.
So perhaps it was last term. So I think it's probably not a bad idea that we get refreshed in the idea.
And yeah, because just to go on, because we've made a couple of changes where we eliminated underpass A, and so there's a lot of things that maybe the committee might want to actually look at with the changes and be able to make a new look at it, and
awesome.
They might come up with a different decision.
It's a great idea. So should we refer this back? Okay, so should we have a motion for that? Councillor Thompson?
Happy to move the motion to refer to the Trails Committee.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kim? Comments, questions? There are no comments, questions on the referral, are there? I'm just looking at the clerk.
I don't believe so.
No. My call?
Yeah.
I'll allow, go ahead.
I think it matters what we're referring to the committee. If we're referring this report to the committee, I don't think that it's pertinent that the committee decide whether or not council choose to charge or to have these overage costs. I do believe we need to have the committee provide some input, but I don't think we need to be, or I don't think we should be, referring this report to the committee.
So if I may, or Councilor Maracas, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to say background information and reports and to comment on the whole plan?
I was just going to suggest if that's the case, and I agree that I don't think the committee should be commenting on the value of as far as dollar amount, but maybe they look at the background information and look at the usefulness of Underpass C and whether they think it's needed within our Master's Trail plan, and see is that, yeah, are you good with that? Yeah.
And of course, you're the chair, you'll be able to see that? Senator's chair. So as long as it's understood at the committee. Are we good? I'll call a vote then. All those vote in favor of the referral? Opposed? That carries. It's getting hot in here. All right, Madam Clerk, I've lost my item 11, and that was pulled by Councillor Humphreys. A motion?
There's a recommendation that staff is asking from us in terms of...
Councillor, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Just get a motion and seconder. Seconded, Councillor Perry.
I'm sorry, apologies.
We got to provide direction.
That's right.
So go ahead, Councillor.
So,
I'm sorry.
I have just a couple of questions, and I'm having a really tough time bringing up my agenda online. I thought I'd be full of technology, but forget it. If I just have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Mr. Romano. In terms of this location, is this replacing the one that was proposed at that other site? Caused a bit of a kerfuffle.
I'll ask Mr. Romano.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct, Councillor Humphreys. If you recall, about a year and a half ago, Rogers came forward with a proposed tower about 235 meters to the west. We asked them to co-locate, and it was a joint effort between Bell and Rogers. Council refused or didn't support the Rogers proposal. So Bell had an agreement with the landowner further east, and so their proposal is for Rogers to now co-locate on their tower, which is located 235 meters to the east, and about 300 meters east east of the nearest residential property. But yes, it'll be a co-location between Bell and Rogers. But this is Bell's proposal.
Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So in terms of location, there's a tower already there? And no, there's no tower there right now? And in terms of, sorry, thank you. And in terms of impact, how homes and residential, sorry, I'm sorry, I can't bring it up to remind me of, is there distance, a fair or farther distance from the houses and residential area than there was before? Just wanted to confirm that.
And were they given notice?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is further away. They were given notice, so it is 235 meters further east. So it is further away from those, from the Offord Crescent residential subdivision. And Bell, conducted the proper public consultation. They had a public information center meeting last December. And as part of the package, they were required to respond to the residents. And the residents, those same residents did, indicated the same concerns that they had with the Rogers proposal. But Bell did comply with our protocol with respect to conducting public consultation and providing the responses to the residents. So they've completed their public consultation, and that's why we're in front of council with their proposal at this point.
Great, thank you. I'll listen to what goes around the table before I make a recommendation.
Thank you. Are there any further comments, Councillor Maracas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, Bell has currently doing a pilot project with the small cell technology within the town, and I'm just curious, could we make a suggestion to them and ask them that maybe instead of putting a tower here, maybe they could add this area as part of the pilot within a residential area and see how well the small cell technology works within this area?
I'd like the CAO to comment on that. I was going to, but you go ahead, please, Mr. Nadarosny.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding of the small cell technology is it only provides data service, and so you still need the towers for cellular service.
That was explained by Mr. Iarulo at EDAC. That's why we sort of are on the same page. We asked the same question.
Okay, and that's fine. I just thought that maybe that was something that they could look into. That might have solved the issue with the residents, but that's fine.
Councillor Humphreys?
And Mr. Chair, in my zealousness to try to get this on the table, make sure that this wasn't an imposement to the residents like last time, I now work for Bell, so I need to step away from the table when it's time to vote, and I probably shouldn't have even spoke to it.
That's correct.
I forgot I even worked there because I was so like, this is not going to happen, but anyway, when it comes time to vote, I'll step it back even though I brought it forward.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor. If I could ask a question. Mr. Ramuno, is this the tower that we see on Bathurst and the one that we have in St. John's with the tripod with the shroud?
To you, Mr. Chair, it is, what they're proposing is a 40-meter self-support structure. It is not as tall as that one on Bathurst Street, and it is a, my apologies, the diagrams aren't very clear, but I believe it is a different type of structure. It's more of a tripod type of structure. So it is a different structure than the one we see currently on the west side of Bathurst Street, and it is 40 meters.
40 meters, but well, the other one's a tripod, but you're saying it's different. Does it have a shroud at the top? And the reason I'm asking, Mr. Ramuno, is that we asked in the construction on St. John's that they put our town of Aurora emblem on the shroud, and I would like to ask them the same request and for consistency in our town.
Something I could certainly ask to see if they're able to do that with respect to placing the shroud in the logo.
If you could for council next week, it would be appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Within the York Region broadband strategy, they've hired an external consultant to gather best practices to develop policies for installing telecommunications infrastructure. And they're slated to be, according to the report, to come back to the region within the next few weeks or so. It seems from just reading it that may have some relevance to our situation. Is there time for us to wait for the broadband strategy and this consultant to come back to the region so that we can hear what they have to say? Through you to Mr. Ramuno.
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair. There probably is. I know they've been at this a long time, but then again, it's up to council to be comfortable prior to making a recommendation on these telecommunication towers. So I can certainly have a discussion with the Bell representatives. They were supposed to. They're aware of this report before council this evening, our general committee. They are not here, but I'll certainly have a discussion with them and report back next week.
They have in the past presented at council or committee, so it may be the case coming up. Councillor Kim, I was going to suggest there is a project that's been spearheaded by Mayor Van Bynen for a number of years on broadband capabilities. I think it's more of a fiber optic buried cable, and I don't know, but I would appreciate to know if they're the same or it was something different in the strategy, because it seems to me that's what he brought forward was a consultation within the region to do so. So I don't know if that's the case, but if I could ask Mr. Ramuno to perhaps look into it, because there may be an explanation, much like there is with small cell.
And my last comment is that I recall the last time this item came forward was that most of the residents that this tower would be serving, that neighborhood, are all against this tower going up. And it seems like the beneficiaries are really residents in northern Richmond Hill. And so it just seems commonsensical that if you're servicing a certain population that the tower should go there, and I understand that perhaps the immediate properties are not available. But it's just hard to support something when it's really not serving our residents, but it's really there to, you just need, it's available land. It happens to be on our side of the street, but it's not really serving our residents. So I just have a problem with that, just a comment.
I appreciate that. I think King City had the same problem with the tower on Bathurst serving Aurora residents, so it's duly noted. But it's in Industry Canada, sort of, so to them there are no boundaries. Any other comments? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. My comments are to do with the property itself. This property in the late 1990s and the early 2000s received a lot of fill that was of the unknown variety. And at the time the talk was, or some of the talk was, this may be compromised soil, contaminated soil. Since then, the town has put in a fill bylaw under the guidance of Ms. Van Leeuwen. And the aim of that bylaw is to prevent, was to monitor the kind of fill that we're getting and ensure that it's not going to compromise the environment. So my two concerns are, building a tower of this type is obviously going to take some earth out of the ground. If that earth remains on the property, it's not an issue. But if that earth is taken off the property, whose responsibility is it to ensure that that earth is tested and disposed of appropriately? I don't know who would.
I'm going to ask Mr. Ramuno if he could first try and. It's a good question.
To you, Mr. Chair. If there is to be any removal of fill, it would be the responsibility of the applicant, the contractor. So it's a question I can pose to them as well, with respect to how much fill they may need to remove and whether they're proposing to move it off-site, but it would be their responsibility.
So you could perhaps let them know that we have a concern with fill that is previously there, and we want to be responsible and know what's going on.
I will ask them that question.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
And I was thinking about that, and it would seem that it would be the responsibility of whoever was doing the work. But at the end of the day, it's under this council's watch. So, you know, we need to do what we have to do to protect the environment, whether it's here in Aurora or elsewhere. Question from Councillor Maracas, very good one. Does an environmental assessment have to be done in this property? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding, not in this instance, because it is a considered piece of infrastructure. That's the responsibility of Industry Canada under their regulations. So I don't think an environmental assessment is required for the installation of a cell tower.
Thank you. And my other concern is with respect to the groundwater. So if the earth is disturbed, the groundwater is potentially going to be disturbed. And we have residents who have wells in that area. So who is going to ensure that there's no negative effect on our residents' well water? Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis.
I'm going to see if Mr. Ramuno wants to respond, and then Councillor Perry, you could perhaps help us.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, it's a good question. I can certainly follow up. It is not, in my opinion, considered, major construction or development, but I understand the concerns, and I will follow up and report back to council on the scale of the alteration that would be required to install this type of tower.
And I think that we've identified a potential for a problem there, and we would like them to look at it, and before they start moving anything, they should do an assessment before anything gets moved. I think is what Councillor Gardner is saying, and we're looking. Councillor Perry, did you want to add to it?
Just to add, the aquifers actually don't flow into Aurora at that point. They flow south towards Toronto. It's one of the few areas where actually water flows to Lake Ontario as opposed to flowing into Lake Simcoe. So there isn't there isn't likelihood that any water would hurt Aurora residents if water If the soil were to be disturbed, I can't speak to Richmond Hill residents, but there aren't any residents close by. I'm just,
We're still, okay, we still respond.
Well-
I think that corner is the Rouge Valley. Oddly enough, there's just a little corner there in that corner of Aurora. The rest south of the hill at Bloomington goes to Humber, and everything else goes to Lake Simcoe.
Thank
However,
you.
we're a
Very,
little
very
off
good
topic.
to know. But good to know. At the end of the day, not only do we have an environmental responsibility, and I think people of Aurora are pretty environmentally responsible and would hold us to account, but also, you know, just to be 100% on the safe side, we do not want to have any residents' well water have any negative effect on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marax, did you, or was that answered? Now, do we have to put a recommendation on the floor? And what is that going to be? Where are the, what are, number 3? It's either concurrence or non-concurrence. So, Councillor Perry?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put concurrence on the table.
Seconded. Mayor Daw? Comments, questions? I'll take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 2 opposed and 6-4. I mean, 5-4. 5-2. 1 absentee. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. All right, we'll go to the last item. Item 18, and that was pulled by Mayor Daw.
I'll move as is.
Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson? Mayor Daw?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out, we had this meeting last night at the Canada 150 Committee, and as you can see, and I apologize that this got to you so late, but we wanted to get something into the 2017 capital budget. So I'll just take a quick second here to explain that the committee's been meeting and has come up with a list of projects that they feel would be worthy for the celebration of the 150th anniversary of Canada. But as you will recall, when we struck the committee in the first place, there was some discussion in terms of should we have a committee and be picking items to do before we have any budget to do it. So what the committee determined last night to do was to recommend to council that of the list that is in your document, and that is on page, apologize. I'm sorry. Page, item 18, page 3. Thank you. That we select items that we would like to see happen. And so the committee came up with the 4, which is a military tattoo, a powwow, a special legacy feature. And there's been a bit of discussion about what that would be, and there's still discussion ongoing. And then the Family First Night's firework, which would be a firework display at the Family First Night to end the year 2017. So the total amount that we put in our grant request for that was $94,000. So what we are asking council to consider is to put a placeholder in the 2017 budget in the event that we do not get any funding.
Okay, and that was moved by you and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Questions? Councillor Thompson?
I'm not sure who's the best answer, but just in terms of a timeline of when will we hear whether or not we're successful in the grant application?
Mr. Elliott? Getting the nod.
My understanding is that we're hoping to hear by the end of the year, but it could be as late as March the 31st. If I may assist in this particular matter, it was our intent to try to bring some additional detail that was before the committee to the budget committee as a reference here. So it may be best simply to refer this matter to the budget committee for capital budget discussion, and staff will bring forward some additional information in this regard.
Mayor Dahl, you okay with that?
I would find that. And just for a bit more background, the Laura Sheardon and Mr. Elliott's group put together the original grant submission, and then when there was a change in the federal government, she had to redo that. So the clock was reset in terms of when, I think it's 26 weeks for them to come back to us with a decision. We've also applied to the Ontario 150. So we do have a number of grant requests out there, but just in the event that that doesn't come to fruition. So it could be, as Mr. Elliott says, it could be as late as February or March before we actually hear back. We're hoping by the end of January.
So right now we have it on the table. We haven't made a referral. Did you want to comment?
I would be happy to move that as an amendment. It kind of implies it would go to the 2017 capital budget, but I'm happy to make that specifically, that would go to, that we refer this to the 2017 capital budget.
Could I have a seconder? Councillor Thompson, on the referral. Any comments, questions? Councillor Gardner, did you? No? I'm sorry, I just see.
I do, but not on the referral.
Then you.
Oh, we're referring, we're just,
Yeah,
that's what
you'll
we're doing
bring
right
up a
now?
budget then, that'll be your next opportunity.
I don't know very much about fireworks, but are there any logistical problems to doing it in the winter? No?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Mr. Downey says no.
No.
They're good ideas. Thank you.
Well, the one at Canada Day was spectacular. So they did a great job on it. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, so we're referring this item, we won't be discussing it any further if it goes to finance, and then it'll come back for us for further discussion?
It's going to budget. We'll be discussing it at budget.
The whole initiative will be discussed at budget.
I think the initiative keeps going, funding of it.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair. So I don't mind that it's coming back for budget, but my concern is, and I feel really bad about this because I'm very supportive of the initiative. I'm just really concerned that we're going to go through and discuss it at budget. And like for me, it was really important that we would know where the grant was. And I feel really horrible. I don't even know how to put this, but other than we've got these great people working really diligently on preparing a really awesome, 150th. And what if half of us don't agree with it? And I feel like this is the tough situation I felt when we first started talking about this whole committee. And I thought, let's not talk great ideas, but let's not really work on them. I know we need time, but until we were secured with grants and then full force. So now we've got this great committee and so much time spent. I don't even know how I could say no at this point. I really feel bad about it. So it just puts me in an awkward position because I really felt that the grant was the reason that I would absolutely support the special events on top of our normal special events that we're going to be doing. But anyway, enough said. That's sort of my thoughts out loud right now.
Perry?
I was reminded that all of our voting records were put online not too long ago. So looking at this, I want the record to be clear that there were 3 members of council who to quote the motion, that the town proceed with advertising for 5 members of the public volunteer on a Canada 150 ad hoc committee, pending notification from the Government of Canada on a successful grant application. And there were only 3 people who voted in favor of waiting to find out how much money was coming in before we went down this path. And that motion was defeated. I think $94,000 is a lot of money to be spending on these events. I'm not going to vote against it now because I do think it's important that I see all of the information in front of us. But I'll let everybody know right now that I'm not inclined to be spending $94,000 on these events, even as a contingency.
All right, so we've got 1 for and 1 against. Councillor Gardner.
Just curious to remember how much money we spend on the sesquicentennial celebrations. Ooh, and how much of that was taxpayer money?
There was a budget, there was money left over.
So actually, the treasurer and I were talking.
Point of order. I believe the motion on the table is just to refer the item.
Fair enough.
So the discussion should be on the referral, not on the merits of the idea. That certainly can come back at budget.
Thank you. Just following on some comments.
I would like to just point out before we vote that I had asked that budget in 2013 for the 2014 budget that we put some money aside, and again in 2014 for the 2015 budget. But here we are with a lump sum, and we are where we should have been. And just because the funding may not have been granted. So my question to you, Mayor Daw, was the last meeting you had May 5th at the 150?
No, the last meeting was last night.
Was the one before that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Where are we? Madam Clerk, are we at new business? New business? No, we're not doing the notice of motion. Sorry. I'll start on my left, new business.
I just wanted to remind everyone that the FCM report is on the agenda for a GC item tonight. If anybody has any questions before next Tuesday, my best ability to answer those questions on Tuesday is if you give me a heads up what those questions are. So thank you.
Councillor Kim. Councillor Humphreys.
Yes, reminder that this Saturday is the last outdoor farmers market. They're closing earlier this year for outdoors. It'll be twice a month for the winter months, starting in November. But hopefully everybody will be there on Saturday. I will be out of town, unfortunately. Sault Ste. Marie family reunion, but hopefully everybody else can make it.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Humphreys, will they have pumpkin pies? Okay, thank you. I have nothing, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Go Jays, go.
Councillor Gardner.
I just wanted to say to Councillor Peary that if there's anything that especially pertains to Aurora, perhaps he could tell us. And I don't know about anybody else, but I've had some negative comments about the Activate Aurora ad that's in the paper. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's, she's a ball crusher, deal with it. Let's get active Aurora. It's a full-page ad, and it's very compelling, but I would like to know who is in charge of creating the ads and how much this would have cost, and who's paying for it.
Okay.
This is by Sport Aurora?
It's Activate Aurora's own program.
I'm sorry. I beg your pardon?
Mayor Daw.
Apologies. It's a private, Be Active Aurora is a private group.
It's not with the town.
And Aurora is not contributing money to it or has no say in it?
We're partners.
We're partners. Are we contributing any money to it? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott, Mr. Downey?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are doing services in kind, and we are reducing our fees by 50% for rentals.
Thank you. Then just a comment for the record that I've had some feedback from some residents and they're not happy with the ad.
I'll be sure to pass it on when I see those as well. Councillor Maracus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. I have three. So, first, Councillor Humphreys, when the Traffic Advisory Committee is up and running, I've had some concerns on Dunning, so I'm just wondering if you could take that. There's been a lot of concerns about speeding. Second, through you to Mr. Simonovskis, is there a possibility that we could put a speed board up at Mavernack in front of Rick Hansen School? There's been some issues with speeding coming down that way.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. And last, so I've had some complaints as far as along Bayview. I mean, we've had a lot of restaurants and stuff open up recently, and we all know that there were some concerns when the McDonald's opened up that there would be some trash and garbage. So some of the residents are noticing that that the trash from a lot of the restaurants, from takeout and stuff like that, is being, people are taking it out, walking along, and they're just throwing the trash. So I'm just wondering, maybe it's a time that we look at, because it doesn't seem like the businesses are doing it. So either we can actually force the businesses to start picking up all this garbage, or maybe we need to look at introducing small waste bins as we do along Yonge, along the Bayview corridor, also for people as they're walking, and maybe that's something we need to look at and consider under our budget.
Thank you. And that's not the only area. I mean, right here in John Westway, St. Colby actually put 100 students to clean up all the Tim Hortons, and I tried to initiate one down at Haida, where Aurora Heights discard all their cups when they go to Max. So we should maybe do a committee. My announcement is the lights are out in the parking lot. I've been notified. The CIO has told me it's very dark, so please use caution. Everyone sort of go out together. Thank you, Mr. Nadarozny. If there's no other announcements, we'll do adjourn. Move to adjourn. Councillor Thompson, Mayor Daw, all those in favor, we are now adjourned. Thank you very much. 8:15, and the first inning is...